My name is Sue Kohler. I'm the chair of the Third Age Committee. Today is going to be a little bit different. We will break at 11:55 to let those of you who wish to attend the noon Lenten service head over to the chapel. Please come back afterwards to join us for a light lunch at a suggested cost of $5. We will continue with Heidi's presentation while you're gone. Both the Lent service and the complete Third Age Forum that we'll have here today will be available online on Westminster's YouTube channel if you've missed anything. Today we're delighted to hear from Heidi with the Minnesota Alzheimer's Association. Bill Davini, a Third Age Committee member, will introduce her after Reverend Margaret Fox opens our forum with a prayer.
Well, we are so delighted that Heidi is here with the Alzheimer's Association to talk about this topic. I'm here to begin with prayer. As you know, I like to look in our Book of Common Worship and see if there are prayers for the various occasions that we have together for Third Age. We had prayers for an upcoming election when the League of Women Voters was here. We did not find prayers for learning about cannabis use or for learning about artificial intelligence. The Book of Common Worship hasn't quite caught up with Westminster's Third Age program, but there are prayers in here both for those experiencing memory loss or dementia and those who are caregivers. So we'll say both of those prayers today. Let us pray together. God of compassion, you have borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Preserve your covenant of peace with your servants in their distress. Although the pain of forgetfulness can be great, we rejoice that you remember each of your children always in your grace. Supply our every need according to the riches of your glory in Christ Jesus. God, our refuge and strength, our present help in times of trouble. Care for those who tend one another's needs. Strengthen caregivers in body and spirit. Refresh them when weary, console them when anxious, comfort them in grief, and hearten them to be companions. Lord of peace, be with us all. Give us peace at all times and in every way. Amen. And now I'll welcome Bill Davini, a Third Age Committee member, to introduce Heidi to us. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning. My name is Bill Davini, and I'm a member of the Third Age Planning Committee. And today I have the honor of introducing Heidi Mathers. Heidi is a retired social studies teacher from Edina High School, where she focused on teaching AP Psychology and AP World History. Heidi is particularly interested in the brain and how changes in the brain can affect one's thinking and behavior. She's passionate about continuing her calling as an educator by volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association. Heidi is personally connected with this disease as she lost her father, 2 aunts, and an uncle to the disease. She has 2 cousins who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, with one in memory care. So please give a warm Westminster welcome to Heidi Mathers.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. It's so good to be here. As Bill mentioned, I did lose my father to Alzheimer's in the year 2020. What happened in 2020? The pandemic. So losing my dad during a time when we could not visit him was absolutely heartbreaking. My mom came to live with us, and I wish I had known about the resources of the Alzheimer's Association when he passed away. There are 20 of us cousins. The 4 siblings died of Alzheimer's. So am I going to get Alzheimer's? I don't know. But I want to do what I can to educate myself and educate others about this disease that can be so devastating, but also can have with it some beautiful moments, some moments that you will cherish your whole life. So I said to Bill, I I left my brain in my car. I hate forgetting my brain. And I don't know if Bill thought, what the heck? It was just in her brain in her head. I have a model brain that I've used for many years as an educator in psychology, and I'm going to point out some things about the brain as we go. So I'm going to have to come back here every time I need to advance the slides. So this first portion is healthy living for the brain and body. I'm going to focus on just a couple of things because this is a truncated version of the full hour presentation. What I'm going to focus on are some things that maybe you haven't heard from your doctor, maybe you have. No, that's okay, I can do it. Okay, so you can see the learning objectives here. I'm not going to read it off right now. I think most of you can read. Okay, let's talk about the brain. I believe this is, your prayer, by the way, brought tears to my eyes, because we are all made in the image of God. We are God's creatures. And whether our brains begin to lose and atrophy and lose what their abilities, we are still God's creation. And I truly believe that. And being in a religious institution here, I feel free to say that. That's not on the Alzheimer's script, by the way, so don't report me. Okay, so hundreds of billions of cells in this brain. The fact that you can think and cry and laugh and move your arms and move your legs all have special areas in the brain that need to be nourished, especially by oxygen. So as you can see, and I don't know if you can see back there, but can you see the red on the top of the brain? So let me kind of walk back here. There are blood vessels that run through our brain, and it's important that we keep this brain healthy as we age. Now, my dad knew that his other 3 siblings passed away from Alzheimer's, and he was the youngest. So he did things that he believed would help him, and they did, and that's what I want to talk about today. The brain is divided into several components, but I'd just like to point out a few. This top part is called the cerebrum. The cerebrum is where that advanced thought occurs. It's the folded part of the brain, and it contains 4 lobes. We have the brainstem here, which is critical for survival. And then we have the little brain back here called the cerebellum. The cerebellum is important for balance and coordination. It is not affected initially in Alzheimer's, but later on in the progression of the disease, it does begin to have problems. So, one thing to keep in mind that I do think is important is the heart-brain connection. So it's really important to take care of your cardiovascular health. What happens if you don't have oxygen in your brain for 3 to 5 minutes? You die. I witnessed my son go into cardiac arrest when he was 16 years old. I witnessed him turn blue. And because he lived, I lived, because I can't imagine how I would have survived the loss of him. But I have learned a lot about the heart in the meantime, because it turns out he had a congenital heart disorder that we were not aware of. So when your heart beats, it squeezes about 50% of its volume every heartbeat. And what that does is it sends blood around your body and into your blood. And it sends that oxygenated blood into your brain so that it can continue to feed all of these vessels in your brain. Because the vessels are made up, the brain are made up of cells that need that oxygen. And if they don't get that oxygen, they're going to start to die off. They'll atrophy, they'll die, and then the communication between those cells will be difficult. So whatever you can do to improve your cardiovascular health, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on that right now, because you're probably getting cared for by doctors who are telling you what to do about that. But make sure, if you have cholesterol medication, take that cholesterol medication. If you have any other cardiovascular markers that you need to take care of, make sure to take care of it. One thing that people often ask is, oh, my grandma or my grandpa or my parent or whatever, yeah, they had dementia. I think they had Alzheimer's. Well, they're not exactly the same. Alzheimer's starts in a particular part of the brain that I'll talk about in a little bit. And other forms of dementia can appear like Alzheimer's, and this is why it's important to get an early diagnosis. So dementia is a general term that describes problems with thinking and memory. Think of it as an umbrella term. Alzheimer's accounts for about 85% of dementias. Other dementias might include things like vascular dementia. This is where you have hardening of the arteries or you have plaque buildup that's not getting the oxygen up to your brain. It could include Lewy body dementia. Who's heard of Lewy body before, by the way? Anyone remember the famous actor who had Lewy body? Robin Williams had Lewy body. Lewy body is a collection of proteins within the brain that interfere with cell communication, but that one is over the entire brain. Alzheimer's is going to be a little bit different. So another one is frontal temporal dementia. Has anyone heard of that, by the way? Frontal temporal, a few people. Frontal temporal dementia is sometimes called the young dementia because it will hit people at a younger age, oftentimes, than the other kinds of dementia. And it affects specifically the frontal lobe right here, responsible for your personality and decision making, and the temporal lobe, which is right behind your temples, which influences speech, facial recognition, and a number of other functions. And this is a very, very difficult disease as well. I'll just keep my brain here, because who knows when I'm going to pick it up again. So I want to talk about a couple of things. Genes and family history. I'm going to skip a couple slides here. Actually, I'm going back to the genes and family history. Okay, so some people have asked, is there a test that I can have done to see if I'm going to get Alzheimer's? And the answer is yes. There are some tests that show that you have the potential to get Alzheimer's. There is a test that tests for proteins that are particular to Alzheimer's disease that interfere with the communication of neurons. There is also a genetic test that can be done using cerebral spinal fluid, and this can identify a couple of genes that are risk factors for Alzheimer's. And it's important to keep in mind that these are risk factors. They are not deterministic factors, because the other things that affect us in our health journey and in our journey with Alzheimer's are our environment, if we're exposed to chemicals or pollution, and then our lifestyle. Are we staying active cognitively? Are we staying active socially and interpersonally? These are really, really important factors as well. Now, I'm going to skip a bunch of slides here, so you can peruse these slides on your own time. But I want to talk about sleep. I love sleep. Does anyone else here love sleep? Oh my gosh. Who had a great night's sleep last night? Yeah, good for you guys. I didn't. But you know, I'm a teacher, and I learned I have a bad night's sleep. I got to still get up and get going. Here's why sleep is important. I'd like to explain to you the two important stages of sleep. The first half of the night is when we go into that really deep sleep. We have that slow, rhythmic breathing. And I want you to picture this. I like using visual cues. Picture a little tiny broom, several little tiny brooms in your brain. What they're doing is they're sweeping out the waste from all of the day's thinking and activity. Because there is waste from the neurochemicals that we use during our day, and the deep sleep cleans it out and makes for better brain function. It helps with immune cell production, and we also believe that it helps to stave off Alzheimer's. That's the first half of the night. Now, are any of you like me where you wake up after about 4 hours and you have to go to the bathroom especially? Anyone? Okay, not too many, but a lot of people will wake up after about 4 hours. And then you go into the second half of the night. So, what happens during the second half of the night? We remember. We remember. The second half of the night, especially during our REM sleep, research has shown us that our brains will sort of relive the experiences of the previous day. And if you have that full night's sleep, you'll get the recuperation and recovery in the first half of the night, and then you'll get that memory in the second half of the night. Now, this is tested rather cleverly in that students were given problems to remember, and then half of the group was woken up after their first 4 hours. The other half were given their full 8 hours of sleep. The ones that only had the first 4 hours of sleep did not do as well on any kind of memory task. So getting quality sleep is really important. So I'm going to go to a tip slide for this. My mom lives in a wonderful building, and they put up an American flag. And my dad was a vet, so he was really happy about that. And they wanted to light the flag. Respectful. Guess where that light shines right in? Her bedroom. Mom, you gotta get room darkening shades. It's a great flag, but you need room darkening shades. Much research has shown that having a dark room is important for the release of melatonin, the ingredient, the hormone that causes sleep. Who's heard of melatonin before? Just curious. Okay, so you all know about melatonin. So if you think about humans before we had lights, it would get dark and people would go to sleep. And there's a gland right behind the hypothalamus called the pineal gland, and that will stimulate the production of melatonin and help you fall asleep. Turning off screens before bedtime is really important. Now, I have on my computer, because I did tend to work into the night, the orange night setting on your computer or on your phone. Has anyone heard of that before, the night setting? Okay, for those of you who haven't heard of it, ask your younger, more technologically savvy friends to get that set up on your computer. Again, research has shown that that orange light is more likely. Think about sunset, right? Sunset helps us to fall asleep, and having that orange light will inhibit those blue light rays that will keep you awake. Think about the daytime. It's blue, and it will keep you awake if you are using screens. The recommended time is about an hour off of screens before you go to bed. The other thing I want to talk about is night lights. Some people like to have night lights because they need help navigating. You know, they don't want to just wake up in the dark and turn on a lamp to get to the bathroom or whatever. If you have a night light, I just want to recommend that it be an orange night light. Why orange? Anyone? Because it's sunset. It's not blue. The other thing is if you have cords that are power cords, has anyone noticed that they always have this blue light on them to show that they're charging? The blue light annoys the heck out of me, illuminates our whole ceiling in my bedroom. My husband's like, Heidi, why did you put a Band-Aid on my charger? And I said, well, I had to cover up the blue light because it was keeping me up. So there you go. It's a simple solution. Pretty sure you probably all have a Band-Aid at home that you can just put over that blue light and hopefully not interfere with your sleep. Okay, so I just want to mention one other thing, and then we need to move on to the next program. Mental health among older adults is something that I have learned through watching my parents age is often ignored. if you're a caregiver for someone who possibly has Alzheimer's or dementia, and you find that you're doing a lot of things that you never had to do before, like balancing the checkbook or filling out the taxes, maybe you are widowed and you are experiencing grief. Maybe you are depressed because you have estrangement in your family. These are all things that affect people of all ages. And I as a psychology teacher, I heard about the problems of teenagers all the time. They have a lot of problems. But I really recognize, sadly, my mom has had 2 people in her building commit suicide. And this just doesn't need to happen. In fact, right here, I can already tell you have a community here. Margaret, maybe you can tell me, do you have mental health resources for people here?
Yeah, we actually have the pretty newly reopened Westminster Counseling Center upstairs that works closely with Westminster and offers mental health and counseling resources. And then we also support the downtown grief support group as well.
Okay. So, if you find yourself in a position where you're having a hard time getting up in the morning because you're just not feeling like your life has meaning, or you're grieving, or you're overwhelmed, there you go. There's a resource right here. And there's no shame in it. There's no shame. After I witnessed my son experience cardiac arrest, I experienced a pretty acute case of post-traumatic stress disorder. He actually had 21 separate incidences. And I got into some really bad behaviors. And I didn't know that I needed help until my kid said, "Hey, Mom, you need help. Get help." So if you notice someone is isolating, not coming out of the room, not connecting with community, reach out to them. Let them know you care, because you're all God's children. Seriously. Okay. I am going to move on to, like I said, there's a lot on this program that I do not have time for because I want to get to the 10 stages of Alzheimer's.
May I just give some context about that, Heidi? Heidi is putting together 2 different programs that usually take an hour each into
Yes.
1 hour for us, but the slides are all available just in case people are having anxiety about missing any of this important information. It is all there. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, eating healthy is important. Oh, I do want to mention this. A note about vitamins and supplements. There is no magic bullet for Alzheimer's. There isn't. There are medications, but there's no magic bullet in the form of a vitamin. So beware of claims on that. Also, keep in mind that supplements can interfere with other prescription drugs. So please make sure if you are taking a supplement, for example, I have one recommended for me for macular degeneration that runs in my family, I'm going to take that supplement. But be careful about that. All right, so I am going to move on to the next presentation, if I can figure out where this arrow is. Okay. The 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. Well, man, you know what? I forgot where my phone was yesterday. I was working on a puzzle, and then I went into the kitchen. I'm like, where is my phone? Well, I went back into where the puzzle was, and there was my phone. That's not a sign of Alzheimer's disease. That's just a sign of being absent-minded. I lose my phone all the time. It seems to be a habit for me. So when we're looking for the warning signs of Alzheimer's, we want to take a look at what is typical age-related memory loss versus or changes in thinking and behavior, and then look at the common warning signs for Alzheimer's and dementia. I'd like to emphasize that these are changes that occur because of Alzheimer's. Now, right now, I'm going to do a little brain lesson, and this is always scary when I take apart my brain. I hope I can get it back together. I maybe can't, but okay. So this is the brain in half. As most of you know, we have 2 halves of our brain. There is a structure in the brain, and it's way deep in the brain. Okay, so it's kind of tucked in here. You can't even see it on this, but it's deep in the brain. And it's called the hippocampus. So I'm going to give you a visual, because, by the way, when you visualize things, you use this part of the brain. I'm going to give you a visual to remember hippocampus. So close your eyes for a second. Picture a hippo. Picture a backpack on the hippo. And picture it walking through school. Okay. Alzheimer's affects first the hippocampus. Alois Alzheimer first discovered this a little over 100 years ago. He was a doctor in Germany, and he had a patient named Auguste. Auguste had profound memory loss, and he actually paid for her to stay at the hospital he was at, because he wanted to investigate her brain when she died. So it wasn't all that noble of a cause, it was more for his scientific interest, but he did teach us something really important. When he did the autopsy on his brain, he saw two specific things. First of all, the hippocampus was virtually absent. It was, and I've actually seen slices of a brain. I've had a neurologist come to my class, and that hippocampus, where that should be in an advanced Alzheimer's patient, is gone. So what does the hippocampus do? It's responsible for learning and memory, thus the hippo with a backpack in a school. Okay, so when I talk to you today, and you think about it, and you get your REM sleep tonight, you might remember the hippocampus. Because what happens is all this information from your senses goes through the hippocampus up into your cerebrum, where you encode it as a memory. And then when someone says, now what part of the brain is affected in Alzheimer's? It has to come back through the hippocampus, and then you can say, oh, I learned about the hippo with the backpack in a school, the hippocampus, okay? So let's look at these 10 stages. We're going to skip the Garcias. This is a fictional family.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
Okay, so that is Dr. Stephen Salloway. He is an expert on Alzheimer's. We might hear from him a couple of times, depending on how our time goes today. I'd like to play these 3 videos. These are other experts on Alzheimer's, and then I think they have some important information to share.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
I'm going to skip that one and go to this one.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific
Skipping
changes
that
in the
one.
brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles.
What the
Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's
do I
marked by
do?
these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
Okay, I am going to show you one more.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things, but when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with. Some of the things that can look like Alzheimer's may be other treatable conditions. If it is Alzheimer's, you still want to know as early as possible, because that gives the person and the family time to plan, time to make decisions, and it also gives the person with the disease a voice and allows them to say what they want.
That last point she makes is really important. Well, all of it's important, actually. We have a friend who is probably in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and he had the protein test. Both his parents died in their 70s. He is 66, and he is showing signs. But he and his wife have decided not to seek a diagnosis. And one of the benefits of seeking that early diagnosis, for my cousin, for example, she wears a transdermal patch that helps with the brain fog. There are some medications that are helpful if you catch it in the early stages. And I don't know how to communicate that to him. We've encouraged him to seek medical attention, but it is important, because then you can include the person with Alzheimer's in the conversation about their care. Because in the early stages, they are still able to think through problems. They are able to contribute in the discussion of their own life. I do not believe that we ever brought my dad into the conversation about his Alzheimer's, and I regret that. And that's one of the things that I would like to emphasize today. So the Alzheimer's Association has put together these 10 warning signs. So let's try to get through as much as we can. Memory loss that impacts daily life, especially early on. They're going to forget, potential people with Alzheimer's or early stage Alzheimer's are going to forget recently learned information. For example, well, Dad, I was just here yesterday. Don't you remember? No. What did you have for lunch? I don't know. Asking the same questions over and over. Why are they doing that? Because they don't remember that they asked it already. And so this requires a lot of patience, I think, on the part of caregivers, but it's part of the disease. And again, this is a change from normal. If someone always forgets important dates and events, your wife or husband or partner or whatever has never remembered your anniversary, them not remember your anniversary is not a change, right? So we're looking at changes. And then using memory aids. Many people will just sort of instinctively start to write out lists, use Post-it notes and things like that. And I wouldn't discourage that, but it's a sign that they know something's going on and they need to leave themselves a reminder. And by the way, if you have any questions as I'm going, please raise your hand. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. What's normal aging? Forgetting names or appointments, but remembering them later, okay? Oops, I was supposed to go to the dentist today. Darn it. I think it was like a Freudian slip, because I don't like the pain of a dentist. I don't know. But that is common, and even forgetting names, that happens to all of us from time to time, and especially as we age. Number 2, challenges in problem solving and planning. Some people may have difficulty with executive functioning, including developing a plan or following a plan or difficulty concentrating. So one thing that might be noticeable fairly early on is if someone who is developing Alzheimer's has been in charge of taking care of the monthly bills. And then perhaps a partner living in the home with them will be looking at the mail and like, why are we getting these past due notices? What's going on? And so that partner might have to take over that responsibility, set up auto pay or whatever the case may be. And then just difficulty concentrating and taking longer to complete tasks that once used to be automatic.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because of I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was I was trying to remember, which was I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was really a vicious circle so I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things, and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
So this is a common approach. Some people, okay. Okay, we just did this one, right? Did we do this one? Oh, okay. So driving into a familiar location. Both my aunt and uncle experienced this. They drove somewhere, and then they had no idea how to get home. My uncle was, he ran out of gas trying to find his way home. And a police officer was very, very kind to him, and, called my cousin, and my cousin went and got him, and then drove him home. He and his wife both went so they could get the car home. My aunt went for a drive, and 24 hours later, she was still gone. We don't know where she went. We know that wherever she went, she couldn't find her way back home. So if you find yourself in a place and you're like, I know I should know this. I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get home. This could be a sign that you are having changes in your brain that might lead to Alzheimer's, or that might be indicating Alzheimer's. Now, my dad and mom are avid card players, and I would say they were our best friends. My husband and I, my parents were our best friends. We were so lucky to have that relationship with them. And there was a time when we had to stop playing the game 500. 500 is a trump game, so if someone plays a heart and you have a heart in your hand, you have to play a heart. Hopefully all of you know what heart, spades, clubs, diamonds are. I know some of you might not, but just those are the 4 suits of cards. Well, we had to stop playing with him because he didn't remember anymore that he needed to follow suit in the game. So if you notice that someone is having a hard time playing a game or doing some of these familiar things, that could be a sign of Alzheimer's and definitely would warrant some further medical diagnosis.
Heidi, may I ask a clarifying question?
Excuse me?
May I ask a clarifying question
Yes.
for these slides? So on the left, it says 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. And then up top, it says what are possible signs of dementia.
Yes.
Is this an Alzheimer's specific list of possible symptoms, or does this signal dementia more generally?
This is one of the things about the PowerPoints that are a little bit concerning. I believe that many of these dementia and Alzheimer's symptoms overlap. I believe that most of this is specific to Alzheimer's, okay? But on the other hand, let's say what's normal aging? Oh my gosh, how do I use this remote control? What? I don't know how to open my email. Well, once again, I didn't grow up with electronics. I'm guessing some of you didn't grow up with electronics. Ask your younger and more electronic savvy friends or relatives to help you with that. That is really normal. If, like this whole electronic age, it just baffles my mother, and that's okay. She has no signs of cognitive decline. Confusion with time or place, sort of like I talked about before, is losing track of things. But one of the things that happens in Alzheimer's, especially with circadian rhythm, is that a person might think it's morning when it's the middle of the night, or they might not understand that it's spring, not fall. My father's particular issue was with the circadian rhythm and with the days of the week. Now, I'm retired. I forget what day of the week it is sometimes, but, I remembered today was Wednesday, so I'm here. My dad, on a Thursday, got up, and he said, "Barb, you're not ready for church yet." "Well, Bob, it's Thursday. We go to church on Sunday." "No, today is church day." And he kept insisting it was church day. So finally, my mom got dressed. They went to church. The church staff greeted them and said, "Bob, it's good to see you. But church is until Sunday. It's Thursday." "No, church is today." And they said, "Well, you're welcome to sit in the sanctuary." So they sat in the sanctuary, and he said, "I'm just going to wait till church starts." This is a man who loved church, by the way. And the one thing that he told me always was love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. He loved church. He loved his faith. He loved the 23rd Psalm, and he was committed to that church. That was the day that Mom called from the car and said, "I can't do this anymore." That was her breaking point. Unfortunately, again, I feel like I didn't know about the Alzheimer's Association. I didn't know that there was a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week number that I could call and say, what do I do with someone who thinks it's Sunday when it's Thursday? They are there to help you, and you should have a handout on that, or it is printed on your guide. Images and visual and spatial images might be affected in Alzheimer's. Now, what's been a really interesting development just in the last year, and I've talked to my ophthalmologist about this, is there are actually changes in the retina, the part of the eye that sees images. They're interpreted in your occipital lobe back here, but you see them in your eye first. And so there are changes in what are called the rods and cones that help us to see color and contrast that are even preclinical. These will become more pronounced once you enter a clinical stage of Alzheimer's. Trouble reading, of course, is common, and then difficulty with balance. There is going to be a time when you need to have that conversation that everyone dreads. What about driving? What about driving? I don't have a good answer to that question, but I will say for my dad and for my friend's dad, it was a doctor at appointment that said, no more driving. But as family members, you may need to have that conversation with the affected person. And you really need to assess, is it safe for this person to drive or not? And that is a difficult, difficult conversation, I will admit. Yes, please.
Had an appointment with the doctor, and he has early onset Alzheimer's, as he tells everyone. Arnie loves driving. That was one of his releases of and enjoyments in life. But the doctor said, do you want to cause an accident that would maybe not only hurt you, but someone else? And that was a great question to ask, because he's still a thinking person. He still has the cognitive ability to make a choice that is rational. And he stopped driving, and I'm going to turn it over to Arnie.
What really makes that remarkable is that my favorite thing for driving was the 1984 Corvette.
Oh.
So that baby just had to go.
Did you keep it, or did you?
No, sold it.
Thought
So,
maybe you would keep it just to caress it.
It's just, I'm still rational. I'm still rational today, but I know that the distraction and those times when Barbara's driving us someplace, and I'm looking around places we've gone time after time after time, and I'm looking at them, I don't recognize this environment. So, the memory has these vacant spots yet. So.
And it's Barbara, right?
That still happens.
And Arnie, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And I think that's a really great question and highlights the importance of bringing the person who has Alzheimer's into the conversation, because then they've made the decision. Like you said, Barbara, he can still think. He still has rational thought. There might be a time when that rational thought is no longer there. So you want to do it when they can still understand what's going on, and you don't want to put anyone else at risk. And I think that is, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with that. The next one.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing, and in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
And that's just kind of building on the last point that I made about trouble with understanding visual and spatial relationships, and probably indicates a change in the brain that helps, that affects your perception, something we definitely noticed with my father. New problems with words in speaking or writing. What were we just talking about? Okay, that's an example of stopping in the middle of a conversation, having no idea how to continue. Repeating, obviously a lot of us know, if we've known someone with Alzheimer's, that they repeat themselves. And why do they do that? Because they don't remember that they just said what they just said. Vocabulary is an important one. My cousin, who's currently in memory care, his wife is actually a neuroscientist. But she did not notice her husband's symptoms because he has a very extensive vocabulary, and he could work his way around what he was trying to say through other words. But not everyone can do that. Just this struggle with vocabulary, having trouble naming a familiar object or using the wrong name. My dad called me April. It's a pretty name. I was born in April, so that was okay. You know what? My name's Heidi. Call me April. I'm okay with that. Sometimes we have trouble finding the right word or the right concept or whatever, and then we'll remember it later. So I just forgot what I was going to say about my cousin. So I went to visit my cousin at memory care, and I said, Bob, this is your cousin Heidi. You are looking handsome as always. He goes, well, I am, aren't I? And you're looking pretty handsome too. That was the only conversation we could have, was about how handsome we were to each other. Okay, he couldn't hold a conversation. But this is an interesting thing that many of you have heard of. We did sing a lot of Christmas songs together, like, over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. I didn't even know the whole song, but he did.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
Okay. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace their steps. I remember at my cousin's wedding, my other cousin and her mom, who was developing Alzheimer's, but we didn't know it at the time, She says, Jane, where's my purse? Well, I don't know, Mom, I think you left it in the car. But she had no idea where her purse was. Well, that's not completely unheard of. I lose my purse all the time. That's why I have one of those ID tags in there so I can play it, because I've always lost track of my purse. But if you start losing things and it's a change from how you were previously, I've lost things my whole life. We're talking like grade school, I lost things, my shoes, whatever. But if it's a change from how someone was previously, then that might be another sign of Alzheimer's. Another thing, and it's not up there, but you might end up, if you're end up putting, for example, if I put my purse in the freezer, might that be a sign? Yes. If you put your shoes in the refrigerator, kind of gross, but that might be a sign. So if you put something in quite an unusual place, that's one thing. I usually just leave my purse by my couch or in the dining room or in the kitchen, and but if I put it in the freezer, that would be a problem.
So some people wonder if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in and they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
And that was number 7. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace their steps. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. This often comes in, it might early on come in a problem with, for example, dealing with money, figuring out how much of a tip to leave, again, paying bills like we talked about before. But another thing is paying less attention to hygiene. Maybe for men, who normally shave, they don't shave. For men or women, they might, not shower. One thing that I noticed with my cousin who has the patch is she was a very well-coiffed woman. She always looked perfect. And the last time I saw her at one of my aunt's funerals, she had spilled something on her shirt. And I thought that is really unusual for my cousin because she's so well coiffed. And the same thing was true of her mother, who was the first one in the family to get Alzheimer's. She always had, these people. There are maybe some that go to this church. They have matching shoes and matching purse, and their hair is perfect, and their clothes are perfect. That was my aunt. And then she started wearing sweatsuits. So definitely a change for her. It's just, that rhythm was not there. Now, I believe this is a time that the
way I kept my house, and all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like a I was a pet wreck, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
Okay.
Heidi,
we need to take a break.
need to stop here and let those of you who want to go to the Lenten service in the chapel, you can walk out now.
Feel free.
You're also free to stay. Yeah, both of them will be on are live streamed and will be on the archived.
And did you say these are services just for Lent, or they're all during Lent at noon? That's wonderful.
And do come back after you finish with the Lenten service. We'll be serving lunch. We'd love to have you so we can sit and chat with you.
Absolutely. Withdrawal from work or social activities. So this is an interesting thing that, why do people withdraw when they have Alzheimer's? Part of it is because they feel uncomfortable. They know that they might not be able to keep up with a conversation. And they're sort of protecting their self-esteem a little bit. It's like, I just might feel embarrassed if I go there. Then people are going to notice something is wrong with me. Something that happened to me a couple weeks ago that was interesting, my sister-in-law was showing me her mother's home, where she has moved to a really wonderful senior living community. And her mom, came with us as she showed us the various rooms of the community. And then when we got to her apartment, she just went into her bedroom and shut the door. Now, if that's how Joanne always was, well, that would be okay. But Joanne, I've known for 45 years. She would always sit down, ask me about the kids, find out about my life. And I talked to my sister-in-law about this, and I said, what do you think's going on? And she's like, well, I think we're going to get her tested for Alzheimer's. And so, again, that withdrawal is really difficult, and part of it is because of, just like, she probably is not able to follow a conversation as well now, and that's why she did that. And again, I would encourage you as care partners and caregivers within your community to try to help, to try not to let that social isolation happen, both for the caregiver and for the individual.
One of the most common changes, and early on, is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit. And then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities, because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
And finally, number 10, changes in mood and personality. Now, when someone with Alzheimer's, what happens is that shrinkage begins in the hippocampus. You guys all remember the hippocampus, right? I hope you all remember that one tomorrow. It begins in the hippocampus, but then as the disease progresses, the loss of neurons and the atrophy of the brain will continue throughout the brain. And so one really important part of the brain that is affected by Alzheimer's is the frontal lobe. Now, if you've known anyone who's had a stroke in the frontal lobe, or they've had a traumatic brain injury in the frontal lobe, you'll often see a change in personality. I had one student tell me, yeah, my grandma had a stroke, and she got really nice. But then other people, and some people with Alzheimer's will maintain their personality. My cousin Bob, sweet, always sweet. How he was a sharpshooter in Vietnam, I have no idea, because he was the sweetest man I've ever known. And he's still sweet. And his mom stayed sweet, just sweet, 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 her whole life. My dad, on the other hand, experienced quite a bit of personality change. And that's a really hard thing, because my dad loved my mom with a passion that I've never seen before. And then my dad started getting angry, and he even pushed her. Again, I wish I knew about that 24/7 line, because he pushed her to the ground. This is so not my dad. And most likely, the frontal lobe of his brain was beginning to atrophy. So he also became extremely anxious. He knew, I felt like in his case, he knew deep in his heart, even though he was advanced in Alzheimer's, he knew there was a problem he couldn't solve. And it made him mad. It made him anxious. And he ended up taking an antipsychotic drug normally used for schizophrenia called Risperdal that did help with that anxiety. So these are some things that you notice as a change. That was a change for my dad. Doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen to some people. Now, some people, as they get older, and maybe some of you are older, I can't tell, you all look beautiful and young to me, but if you're older, sometimes you get set in your ways. You want to do things a particular way. That's how my mom is. You got to do things A, B, C, D. You got to do it in that order. If you try to deviate from that order, she doesn't like it. The thing is, she never liked deviating from that order. And as she's gotten older, it actually seems even more pronounced, because she wants to sit in a particular chair at my house, and even if I'm sitting there, she'll say, Heidi, can you move? I want to sit in that chair. But she doesn't have cognitive impairment.
Another early sign of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated, or more impatient, or a little moody, or have a shorter fuse, or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
All right, so our time is up. What I would like to point out to you, and I want to be respectful of your time, but we did not get to the second half of the presentation. So,
it's a bit...
Oh, okay. There are 10 steps to approach memory concerns. If you look in your packet, you'll see the steps, and I recommend that you take a look at that. You also have some really helpful handouts.
Heidi?
Yeah.
We actually have a little more time if you want to continue.
Are people okay with that? I mean,
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Well, if you need to leave, feel free, because I am conscious of that for you all. So you did print these out, right? 10 steps to approaching memory concerns. And assessing the situation is part of it. And then there's another handout. Did you print out this one? Evaluating? Okay. So hang on to these two. I think these two are really helpful. So the first step is, what specific changes are you seeing in this individual that you're concerned about? And just, jot them down. This gives you a context for that. What else is going on? Are there other health issues that might be affecting the person's memory or cognition? Sometimes there are other health conditions, thyroid conditions, depression, anxiety, family problems, whatever, a lot of stress that might cause problems with memory. So think about, are there family stressors or other health stressors that might be affecting this individual? Do learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. And those benefits include starting some medication early on. Some of the medications cannot be started once someone has reached moderate cognitive impairment. they only are effective when someone is in the earlier stage of mild cognitive impairment. The other reason why this is important is, like I said, to include that individual in the conversation. Step 4, has anyone else noticed changes? Now this is, we're concerned about Joe. Have you noticed anything about Joe lately? And if nobody else has really noticed anything, well, maybe you're just overly sensitive. I'm overly sensitive to myself and my cousins because I know this runs in our family. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Rick forgot that I was coming to his house. Like, what's up with that? But, have other people noticed changes? That's important to take a look at. Have a conversation. Who should have the conversation to discuss the concerns? So this is important to consider. Who is in your support network if you have concerns about your loved one? Who else would you bring into the conversation with you? Barbara, do you have any insight for us on that one?
My advice is don't wait. If you notice, don't think about it for months, because the earlier you can tap into the resources available, the better. For example, we were hoping that Arnie would qualify for a 2-year infusion medication that makes it supports reducing the effects by 30 to 35%. Unfortunately, he was tested and had brain bleeds in his history. There's no way to say when the brain bleeds happened, but because he had brain bleeds, he didn't qualify for that type of medication, or that type of, well, it is a medication, but anyway, that was really disappointing, but he's doing well on the medication he's taking right now, so.
And did you involve anyone else in the conversation?
Absolutely. His 2 daughters, both of whom, well, one is a neuroscientist and one is works in the, she's a, what's the word? I'm blanking on a word.
That's okay.
Yeah, she's a therapist, and so she comes to almost all of Arnie's appointments with his neurologist with us, and sometimes it's virtual and sometimes it's in person, but that's so helpful because she asks questions that I wouldn't have a clue to ask because she's a therapist, so that really is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that again. I really appreciate your transparency and sharing your own experiences. So in the case of my dad, my 2 sisters and I were, unfortunately, we didn't catch it early because my mom really tried to cover it up and compensate for things that my dad was doing that were unusual. But once you do get that diagnosis, or even before the diagnosis, bringing in those loved ones is really important for support, as you said. And then think about what is the best time and place to have the conversation. If you're going to have a conversation with a loved one that you want to have an appointment for to see if they have cognitive impairment, think about the best time of day for them. Some people might be better at night, some people might be better in morning, some people might be better after a nap. Just think about what is the best time. And then make sure you have the conversation in a place that is comfortable for that individual. Most likely that would be at home. I don't think you want to go to the local Perkins and go, hey, by the way, we want you to go to the doctor. That's probably not a good approach. So think about those things. What will you or the person having the conversation say? And there are some tips on here. It's just, kind of talking about what you've noticed. And you could ask them how they've been feeling lately. Have they noticed anything in themselves? Like Arnie was talking about, like being somewhere and sort of not knowing where you were, I think is what he said. those kinds of things are helpful to take note of as you prepare to go to a doctor. Offer to go to the doctor with the person. You certainly do not want to send someone off to the doctor by themselves when they're getting evaluated for cognitive impairment, for Alzheimer's or other dementias. And if you're comfortable with it and they're comfortable with it, if you have a child or a sibling or any other trusted friend that you want to bring with you, then make sure it's okay with the individual, but ask them to come along as well. Some people need to have multiple conversations. Denial is a pretty easy thing to do. We don't want to admit that we're having problems, even when it comes to mental health. Dang, you just don't want to go out to everyone and say, I'm so depressed. I'm really depressed today. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe some people do. But, sometimes you really need to have multiple conversations with someone and think about those questions. What worked well the first time? What didn't work well? Did the person get agitated? How can you make them more comfortable in a further conversation? And then finally, reach out for support. The Alzheimer's Association has just incredible tools. Again, I wish I had known about them when my father had Alzheimer's, although I don't know that the 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week line was in place then. I certainly would have gone to alts.org to find out more information, and then see a doctor. Now, many people have their yearly physical with Medicare, and I'm just curious. I believe that there are some memory tests sort of embedded into the physical once you're of Medicare age. Is that correct? I'm not of that age yet, so I don't know. They may indeed refer you to a specialist. Any one of these might be a specialist that you might see. One misunderstanding about Alzheimer's, by the way, in particular, is that you can't diagnose it till you die. It can't be diagnosed till you die. That is simply not true anymore. There are a number of diagnostic tests, including functional MRIs, PET scans, and other kinds of cognitive tests that can give a definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, other than having to wait till you die. So, benefits of early detection.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
So if your doctor is connected to clinical trials, that might be one of the things that you might want to get involved in. That's an individual decision. So I'm going to skip a few slides here. Like I already said, diagnoses are possible. So what is next in the Alzheimer's diagnosis? Then you begin to seek treatment. We're just about done. So we are part of the Minnesota and North Dakota chapter. The Alzheimer's Association mission is to lead the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias. There are 2 brain diseases that I have hoped for in my life to see a cure for. The first one was schizophrenia, which my uncle suffered from, and now one of my cousins' son has schizophrenia, which is just a devastating disease that attacks young people's brains. But Alzheimer's is the other brain disease that I hope in my lifetime we will see a cure for. These are the resources. I'm not going to play the videos, but that helpline, honestly, use it. If you're the person that is concerned that you have Alzheimer's, or if you're a partner of someone that you're concerned, or you have a friend that you're concerned about, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, I don't think I can deal with this anymore. I don't know what to do. They will guide you. And by the way, there are on alts.org, you'll see a number of resources available. There are resources for community resources, finding out what's available in your community. There are financial resources for helping you figure out the finances of care for someone with Alzheimer's. There are resources for both online and in-person support groups for caregivers. And then the Alzheimer's organization is all over the country. It is a wonderful organization. I'm so happy I got to be here with you today to talk about this. Are there any questions before we close for lunch? Any questions? Yes.
Let me get to them.
Somewhere in the 70s, this is a little historical fact, we had a women's retreat, and the woman who spoke was on leave from Medtronic because they gave people, who are Medtronic people, worked there so long, could apply for a grant to study, take a sabbatical and study something they wanted to do. And this woman, who was probably in her 50s, had a husband with early onset Alzheimer's that he got in the 40s, and we had not heard the word until then. So it was a theme of a whole women's retreat somewhere in the 70s.
Wow.
So long, long ago, we didn't know that word before then. It was hardening of the arteries. It was, grandma's
senile dementia.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite interesting to think that over time, the first place I heard about Alzheimer's was with this community, and here we are together, learning about it together. So thank you very much.
That is really cool. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Does the Alzheimer's Association, either the national or state, receive federal funding?
I know that the large portion of the Alzheimer's Association is funded by private donations. I would actually have to look that up, and you bring up a really good point in this current situation we're in right now, and I'm sorry I don't have an answer to that. I do know there is a walk for Alzheimer's that's coming up. There are other fundraising opportunities. A lot of endowments and trusts contribute to the Alzheimer's Association, and the research money that I know is being limited right now is affecting a lot of areas of research. I will look into that, but I do not have an answer for you right now.
So it might be something we'd want to contact our Congress people about to
Absolutely.
advocate for.
You know what? If you know how to do a Google search, or if you don't, ask someone to do it for you. Does the Alzheimer's Association receive federal grant money? If it does, I recommend that you make those calls. I've been making calls on behalf of things like USAID and other things that I think are really important. And we need our support for our populations that have Alzheimer's disease. We need to continue that. So thank you. That was a really good question.
Heidi, I know that Ted said from the Alzheimer's Association that the reason we asked for your zip codes was for funding for them. They need to know for some of their funding grants where they're affecting people.
Yes, they do want to keep track of their reach as well, who's getting reached, who's getting the information. Yes.
Yes, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
After hearing you introduced an hour ago, at age 77, I've gone and forgotten your name.
Heidi.
And Heidi, oh, okay, Heidi. And And I remember my question, and that would be this. I didn't hear you mention Parkinson's. In the 20 years I took care of my parents in California, back and forth, or sometimes half of it there, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's at age 61, and eventually there seemed to be dementia. And maybe it's the Lewy body that you mentioned earlier, which also afflicted the actor Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And, but neither of those diseases, my mother and father, both at 61, all diabetes and Alzheimer's. No, I mean, diabetes and Parkinson's, neither of those are considered fatal diseases, treatable. And, but what they do is they relentlessly pick away at you, and there's complications.
Yeah, and
but is Alzheimer's invariably fatal? And if it is, why? Can't the brainstem, it doesn't get all the brain cells, can't the brainstem keep the heart beating and the digestion going?
So I think you have two really good questions here. I want to answer them both. Parkinson's is a disease of dopamine, a chemical called dopamine in the brain. It begins in a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and so we stop producing the dopamine, which allows for voluntary movement. And it does help with, it's like a reward center too. The Alzheimer's starts in the hippocampus, close to the nucleus accumbens, but it affects a chemical in the brain called acetylcholine. So they are different, but one can have both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, even though their origin is different. On the second question, if you look at the brain of someone who has had Alzheimer's, and I have actually seen human brains at various stages of Alzheimer's disease, it begins in the hippocampus, and then the atrophy extends to the cerebrum. Now, the cerebrum, remember, is this covered area with all of the folds. The next place that it attacks is the cerebellum. This is where our muscle memory is, so our ability to hold a pencil or hold our spoon. And when the cerebellum begins to atrophy or shrink, then some of those automatic functions that, continue, being able to walk, things like that, they also start to diminish. And then it will eventually hit the brainstem. And so what the particular thing that happens when it hits the brainstem is the inability to swallow. So once my father reached that stage, he could no longer swallow. Then he was put into hospice care. So you are right. The person who has Alzheimer's, that brainstem keeps working for a long, long time. That's why you can survive, 12 years after the diagnosis. But once it hits that brainstem, there's really nothing else that can be done. And we are looking at Alzheimer's, or at end-of-life care. It is, by definition, a fatal disease.
I'm sorry, we will need to wrap up now, but thank you for the questions. And Heidi, I don't know if you're able to join us for lunch.
Yeah,
We've got sandwiches
to.
from Jimmy John's, so you can find Heidi at lunchtime for your questions. But let's give Heidi a round of applause for this presentation. Really, really grateful.
Thank you all.
Yes. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, Margaret.
Sue will close us down, and I'll say a prayer, and then
Okay.
we'll have our lunch. Sue, would you like to do your announcements, and then I'll pray for lunch?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
There's my slide. Once again, thank you, Heidi. That was fascinating and a lot of information. I would like to introduce our committee members today. We've got Andy Peterson in the back. Will you stand, Andy? You can wave too. We've got Bill Davini. There he is back in this corner. We've got Carol Balfour, who is off in the chapel. Thank you, Chris, or Bill. Chris Martin, also back. We've got the Reverend Margaret Fox and myself. We have two other members who are out of town this week, Ed Suitsman and Scott Applewick. I'm telling you their names because at the beginning of June, we will be having an annual planning retreat to plan for next year's programs. If you have any ideas for future topics or any suggestions you'd like to make, please let any one of us know. We want your input. That's important to us. And then for upcoming programs, no program in April. I'm going to skip past the homework for a moment. May 14th, what happens when we die and how to plan ahead. We've got Michael Sorrell, a local funeral director, who will discuss the many options of what to do with a loved one's body after death. It's no longer a simple choice of burial or cremation. The Reverend David Shin will also discuss how Westminster can assist in pre-planning your memorial service. Now up to homework. The Reverend David Shin has requested that you complete one of his handouts, and I'm gonna have Bob hand them out on the table for you, as long as we've got pens there. Complete as much as you can of the form and bring it with you to the May Forum. I think that's all I had. Margaret, will you lead us in a prayer?
Sure. I just want to say thank you again to Heidi for your presentation. I took away, and also just to Barbara and Arnie for the contributions that you made. One of the things I've really appreciated about your presence in this congregation is just your willingness to share openly and really remove some of the shame or the stigma that I heard also from you, Heidi, talking about the ways that can get attached to memory and aging. And so I'm so grateful for that kind of ministry of presence here and for your presentation. I've had takeaways from it about just early conversations about relationality and about just the importance of maintaining other kinds of health too, of social and physical and staying active and involved. And I'm grateful for all of the ways at Westminster. I'm looking at Angelique with the magnet in the back. You know, all of the ministries of connection that we have are so vital and important. One thing I wanted to advertise for that's not related to Third Age, but you all are welcome to be involved. On Saturday morning, March 22nd, we are having a cleanup day at Westminster. This is a chance. You do not have to be on a committee to participate in the cleanup day. If you're looking for like a one-time volunteer opportunity to come in, we'll do some dusting and some mopping and some scrubbing and with different activities for different mobility levels. But it's a chance for us to do a little spring cleaning, get the church looking spick and span. I know the PNC pretty soon will begin in a very clandestine way, but bringing in candidates to check out our space, so we want it to look good for them. I'm told that treats will be served. If you're practicing Lent, you can practice abstaining from those treats. Either way, there's signups on Realm just to get us a sense of how many treats to get. So if you're free on Saturday, March 22nd, that's an easy service opportunity that we can all participate in. Okay, that's it. That was my one plug. So let's go ahead and pray together. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this ministry of connection and this time to be together. We thank you for Heidi, her expertise, her personal stories, for the sharing and the teaching that she did with us today. We ask your blessing on the food that is before us, for all who prepared it and brought it here. May this be a time of conversation and connection for us all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.